All right. So we're live now. This is the Synth Summit Show episode. What was it? 32, I think. So I'm excited. I'm excited. We have Kris from Noise Engineering here, and this is our kind of. I haven't done much for NAM at all, really, but this is kind of a pseudo NAMish type event. Because that's usually the only time I get to see you. So,
Yeah.
Kris, how are you?
I am, well, apparently awkward, based on the story you just posted.
Did you see the picture yet?
Not yet.
Oh man, I can't wait for you to see that one.
And I feel like we should do. Oh dear God.
I told you it was perfect. It's perfect timing.
Amazing, amazing. And based on our typical NAM behavior, I feel like even if it weren't a pandemic, we would need to be doing our typical elbow bump.
Yeah, we're gonna discuss weenuses later.
Okay. As long as we come back to it.
Is plural weenus weeni? I don't know.
I think so.
So I'm not sure how that works out, but that's the story I'm sticking with. So I'm pretty excited because there's a lot to cover. And I'm gonna probably be bouncing back and forth all over the place as I normally do on the show. But what we'll do first is kind of we'll roll into the basics. So the first thing I want to do is, can you please tell us first, what is noise engineering?
We are God, what are we at this point? We are traditionally modular synth company. We started a few years ago making modular synths. We moved into making 5U a few years ago. I'm sure we're going to talk about it in a little bit. Started working with Arturia a bit ago and made some oscillators for the MicroFreak. And then just this week, I can't believe that was just 3 days ago because it feels like a month ago, announced that we are moving into the plugin space too. So our goal is to make things for people to make music with wherever you're making music.
Excellent. So you handle engineering, hardware engineering for noise engineering. Let's now bounce way backwards and start off with what your introduction to synthesizers were to begin with.
Oh gosh. So that would have been in the early so I came from a musical family. My grandfather was actually my grandparents were both classically trained piano and organists. And so, everybody in my family played. That was just a thing. And I actually really wanted to play drums. My father played drums. My parents somewhat sensibly decided that drums were probably a bad idea for me. Turns out drums are pretty noisy. So they got me some drum pads. So that was probably, I think that was my first synthesizer. I'm not really sure that counts. And then I moved into a really, really shitty, the kids' Casio from there. And then I became obsessed from there with the DX7. And that was my very first synth. My best friend from junior high actually got in touch with me fairly recently. And I can't even remember how we got on the topic, but I said something about, do you remember my keyboard? And she's like, oh, the DX7. And she has zero interest in music. She's not in the music industry, nothing. And all of these years later, she remembered the DX7 because I was so obsessed with it. She's like, yeah, that is literally all you talked about. So that was my basic entrance into synths.
Okay. So, but the noise engineering thing that came along much later for you. What were you doing before noise engineering?
I was a biology professor.
And how does that relate to getting involved with noise engineering? Like how do you make the mental transition of, okay, I'm in a respected field doing respected work, to now I'm making noise products?
So Stephen and I, so Stephen is my husband. He started noise engineering. Well, so let me back up. We met in a bar in 2007, and we bonded over. He was an audio programmer and working in video games, and I worked in frog bioacoustics. So frogs make a lot of noise. That is typically how you tell. Well, it is how I tell them apart. Most people look at them. I listen to their calls because every species has a different call, so you can tell the different species apart by their call. And there's a lot of really interesting work on how animals call and lots of bioacoustic stuff. So we met in a bar and we bonded over sound and noise and that sort of thing. Uh, we ended up getting married, and our jobs kind of took us on these like very just kind of all encompassing careers that were just like, I would go to work early in the morning. He would come home in the um, wee hours of the night, and we basically were never seeing each other. Um, and he had started noise engineering. We've told this story in lots of places, but really on a dare. One of his coworkers was like, well, if you're so smart, um, make me a module, because Stephen had been, critiquing every single module that his friend had. And so Stephen just started making modules as a hobby in a spare bedroom in our house. And it was something that had started to grow. We were really lucky with a couple of early modules. So we got to a point where we really wanted it to be something that we could do. Neither of us were really happy in our careers. So we made some spreadsheets because we live our lives by spreadsheets. And we decided to say, screw it. And we quit our jobs, bought a house, moved, and started working together on noise engineering full time, like within about a week of each other. Well, we bought the house and then moved a little further apart. But yeah, it was a really big transition all at once.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I would imagine that's a fairly scary thing to jump into, when you had been kind of doing other things. With that process being such a drastic change, did you find yourself kind of like scrambling to kind of get things together how you wanted them, or was it more like a slow burn?
Oh my god, it was a complete shit show for the first year. Um, because when I started, I took over. We had a long conversation of whether I should take over hardware or start taking some software, or what would be the most reasonable thing for me to do. And hardware, if you want to be a really good programmer, um, you can learn the basics um, pretty quickly. But Steven has a lifetime of experience, and for me to catch up to him would have been like just not possible. Hardware, and I don't mean to say that hardware is easy or to take away from the mad skills that some people that are out there have. I still have a ton to learn, but the barrier to entry on hardware is a little bit lower.
Mhm.
So I spent the first year trying to figure out hardware, and I had to teach myself how to use CAD and how to like make a schematic and how to route a PCB, and like the rules of like, okay, well, these need to be close together. These need to not overlap. These need to, whatever. And just, there was a lot of weird things that, and things that, because Stephen had been doing it all by himself, as entirely as a hobby,
Mhm.
he hadn't prioritized or really thought about organizing because he didn't need to. It was all up in his brain, and you know, um, so it was a really, there was a lot that year, and it was kind of trial by fire that first year.
Sure.
But I've said in lots of places that like I have a lot of degrees and they're all in science, and those have prepared me to do a to just to learn things. So
Sure. Y-
I I
the
had
research
done.
side of it is interesting. And to me, it makes me wonder, what were some of the resources that you were going to get started out on that and to really go down that path?
Oh, good question. What did I do? Um, I Googled a lot of things. Um, I don't learn very well.
I don't understand.
My
That's
phone
how I
thinks.
feel.
Yeah. I said the G word and my phone
Yeah.
was like, "I'm sorry, I don't understand." Um, yeah, I did G word a lot of things. Um, I don't learn very well from my spouse. And that's honestly that is a shortcoming of me, not him. He's extremely patient. He's way more patient than I am. Um, I so I did a lot of googling. I did a lot of just reading, and just trying to understand. I Radio Shack has these really really goofy kits, and so I just got some of those and started building shit just that weren't even related, just so I
Mhm.
could understand basic circuits because I haven't played and dabbled with circuits in eons, before I started this. So that was really useful. Um, and then, it did really help that I had Steven to say, how do I, where do I start? What's my starting point? Because often that's, if I could get started on something, that was often my, like, once I got over that part,
It's kinda
I,
like once you learn the language, you can read the book kinda
yeah,
thing.
exactly. And then, the starting point is often like, if you pick a better starting point, um, like where you start on a lot of electronics really matters, and will make the project easier or impossible. Like routing a PCB. If you don't start, like I always start, if I'm writing a PCB, I always route the power first. Uh, and I have like a couple of conventions that I always do. Like one side of the PCB is always vertical, one side of the PCB is always horizontal. And those were little tricks that Stephen taught me that I didn't read anywhere, but those were really um, really instrumental to me getting fluent in routing PCBs. And now I'm just like done. I can
Mhm.
fly things.
I know that, there's certain forums out there for, Eurorack users, and manufacturers as well. Did you pull from any of those resources, and did you find, like, any kind of barrier to entry for that sort of thing? Did you find like it was, um, easy or difficult to get information on kind of the information that's already out there? What roughly year would this be around?
This was 2016.
Okay.
Um, I didn't look at any of those forums, partly because a lot of them are on Facebook, and
Mhm.
to this day, I have never had a Facebook account. Um, and it's not because I mean, I do think that Zuckerberg is kind of a schmuck, but also I just can't cope with Facebook. We have a noise engineering Facebook account, but like I just can't deal with the idiocy of Facebook.
I don't
Um,
blame you. I really don't.
so anything if it's on Facebook, I haven't looked at it. I guarantee it. Um, and so that has, to my own detriment potentially, but like I just have not looked at any of the forums, or I know there are a lot of really great communities on Facebook. I just can't. Every
Mhm, mhm.
time I open the noise engineering Facebook, which is not very often, but when I do, I'm just like, why is this set up so stupidly?
I don't even have issues with how things are set up. My issues tend to be more about the people, um, the actual individuals involved. Which, not to say I'm any better. I've got plenty of my own issues that I put on full display for everyone. So, yeah, I just found that, making that transition, and kind of with a lot riding on it, really. Like it's not like you're saying, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna do this, but it doesn't really matter if I succeed or fail. You're like, hey, I'm gonna do this, and I better do this. Um, I myself, just on the outskirts, have seen a lot of barrier to entry for a lot of things. So that's why I find it interesting. How people go about their learning paths, and like you said, like you're saying, you haven't learned too much from Steven when you're doing that, using him as that sort of resource. um for
Well, I mean,
me.
that's kind of a unfair way to phrase that though, because a
Yeah,
lot of what we do is like if we have a gate circuit, a gate input circuit, like we're not going to redesign that every time we
sure,
make a gate input. So like if we have a gate input circuit that works that we've had for 4 years, it's probably going to be the same. That it may be tweaked over time, and maybe we think later on like, hey, there's probably a better way to do this. Um, and we'll redesign it. But and like recently we redesigned an entire board just because it made more sense to do it that way. But for the most part we reuse a lot of circuits. So a lot of what I did early on was under like just learning how the circuits that we had worked, what they applied to and what they didn't apply to. And definitely had some mistakes. We would get a board, and I never made one without a power header on it. That almost happened once. Um, but you're putting all of these things together, and you're just like, okay, it's got the 4 inputs, it's got the 4 outputs, it's got this, it's got that. Then you like put all the schematic together, and then you don't like think about the fact like, oh, where does it plug in?
yeah.
Good job. You get a little lost in the weeds there. Um, Now we have some checks for that. But, we definitely have made mistakes, and some costlier than others, but, a lot of what I did was just learn from the things that we had already done,
Sure.
and that was really helpful.
Yeah, yeah, I think what I was getting at is just that, I tend to find that, a lot of the times, if I'm so for instance, my wife is a fantastic hairstylist, like, she's world class, and, she'll tell me things to not make my hair look like hacked up lettuce, and I'll take it in, I'll take the advisement, it's excellent information, and then I'll do the opposite. It's just a problem that I have. You know? It's not to say that I don't value that information, it's that, I'm constantly trying to experiment on my own because that's how things kind of lock, for my mind. I find that a lot of the Eurorack market, and synthesizer market in general, I have noticed a lot of people doing things in interesting ways where they kind of, um go around to get to the same kind of ideas, but they do it in very different ways. And uh, one of the things that I'm noticing with like noise engineering is it's a lot of there's a lot of interesting processing going on, right? So you guys will do things like lo-fi oscillators. And when I say lo-fi, I mean like kind of grungy and bit rate reduced kind of low bit rate type stuff, that sort of thing. Um, but then I noticed some really complex modules that you guys have as well. Uh, those things really kind of strike me as almost at odds with each other. When you're designing hardware for these sorts of things, does this stuff, do you try to focus on like, okay, well, we've already done this, let's just kind of further this down the road and expand upon what you've already engineered? Or is it a lot of, okay, we did this and now I just want to do something different. I just want to kind of come at this from a different angle.
It really depends. Like it depends a lot on what we're trying to achieve. Um, we usually have a lot of things that we're working on. We we work in GitHub. We have like 150 repos or something like that. It's ridiculous how many things that we have like in some scale of like things that we're designing. And some of them are just like a lofty idea that may never ever come to fruition. Some are something that may become an alt firmware for the Desmodus. Maybe it'll be combined, 3 ideas that we have will be combined later on, right? So what we typically do is when we write down the ideas, we put them down in GitHub or somewhere, and when we are ready to discuss those ideas, we'll figure out what exactly they want to be. We have a meeting every Friday now by Zoom, and we argue them out. And we sometimes argue quite vociferously about what those are going to be. um, but once we have a pretty good idea, then Marcus, one of our employees, does a what we call a design file. So Marcus will sit down and say, okay, it has 4 inputs, four gate ins, 4 gate outs. It has these knobs, these switches, whatever. Um, and then if I know what it's trying to do, I know which processor it needs. And then we can put it on, we can start moving forward with the design.
Do you ever like work on the hardware side and say like, look, here's the platform. Do what you want with it, but this is the platform.
We don't typically do that because that's just like a module in search of a function.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather do something very, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't want to put modules out just to put modules out. Like
Sure.
if it's not something that we would want to use at a reasonable price, then we don't want to put it out. And in fact, we got a prototype in. Thank you. We got a prototype in sometime in 2020 that we were pretty excited about. We priced it out, and it would have been so expensive for what it was that we just were like, that it's not a reasonable product, and we killed it.
Mm-hmm.
So, we think about all of these factors as we're working on stuff.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you go the more purposeful route like that, because it is very common for people to do like a platform and then develop like X amount of products need to be on that platform, and then they'll move on to another one and X amount of products on that platform and then move on. So it's nice to see it done that way. I will say this, okay? I part love and hate the naming convention, because it makes it extremely difficult for me to remember what everything is.
It's
So
true.
what give me some thoughts on your naming conventions, and one, how it came about, and then two, you know, what are some of the pluses and minuses with that?
Okay, so it came about from this ridiculous video from I want to say it's the 50s. It's called the Turbo Encabulator.
Encabulator.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I know it already. Yes.
It is fantastic. And if
Yes.
anybody that is watching hasn't seen it, you should. Maybe you can put that
And
in the
there's been updated versions that are every bit as good too.
Yeah. So the long story short of that video is that it's a guy was it IBM? I think it was IBM.
Yeah, it was something to that effect. It might have been like a whatchamacallit Labs.
Bell Labs or
Yeah, I think so. Something to that effect.
Yeah, it was one of those companies, but he was giving a seminar, and this guy gives this very straight-laced, very uptight dude in a suit seminar about the turbo encabulator, blah, blah, blah. And it's all jargon, and it is amazing, and it is ridiculous. And he just goes on and on about all of these words that have zero sense, zero meaning. And so that was Steven's idea. It was not mine. It was Steven's idea. So he named everything after sort of Latin-ish or Greek-ish, depending, in when he started the company. And so we've kind of stuck with that. The perk of that is that if you search Bassimilus, there's literally nothing else that comes up other than our
Absolutely.
product. So from a marketing perspective, it's pretty freaking killer. Um, I get why people don't like it, and we have we are working on making the sites a little bit more the website a little bit more clear about what each one the functionality is on each one. Because I get that, like that, it is hard to keep track of what everything is. But uh, I kind of enjoy how ridiculous it is, and
Yeah,
I mean, like, but let me say this: can you tell me off the top of your head what the dope for A141.3 is?
that's a filter, isn't it? Am I
I don't
right? Am I
know.
wrong? I don't
I
know.
don't
I have to
know.
double check.
But the thing is that you get my point. Like a lot of modular names, like what does Batumi do? I mean, I love Batumi. Don't get me wrong. Batumi is a killer module.
I was
But like
wrong. It's a LFO. It's a
that
LFO
one I know.
slash
That one
VCO.
I know. But like a lot of modular names don't really give you insight into what they do. So the people that single us out are just mad because they don't know Latin. Um, so, I get the frustration. And we we've had kind of a rebellion at the company against Stephen to make the names a little bit simpler so that we don't have Bacillus Ateritas is quite a mouthful. Um, and we are trying to make the names a little bit shorter and easier to pronounce and as we go forward. I
I
can't
tend
guarantee they all will. Stephen might win on that
I tend to not mind it so much, except for the fact that as the module lines grow, it gets harder to keep track of which is which. So
one. Yeah.
like when noise engineering first started, it was like, okay, like there was like, maybe 6 modules out there that it was like yeah, like have you heard this noise engineering module? And everybody knew what you were talking about because it was a more finite group. And now I feel like it's expanding to the point where I'm like, the yeah, that one. So,
Well,
um,
so we do try to have like the Ateritas are all the oscillators. So there are family names. So like Ateritas is an oscillator, or I'm trying to look at our modules to see what we have. Uh, but like there are patterns in the naming. So you'll definitely if you are interested and into our products, you'll see that there are a variety of solum. Anything with solum is time. So fractio solum, horologic solum, anything with solum is a time thing. The ruinas are all distortions. So there's a lot that you can look at and just realize that there's a relationship there. But
excellent.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot there to keep track of. I get.
So this would also kind of tie into your panel designs. Who comes up with the panel designs?
It has evolved over time. The very first one, the ataraxic translatron, we outsourced because Stephen didn't know anything about graphic design. After that, Stephen took it over. When I started, I took it over. That was probably the biggest source of our fights because I wanted to change the panel design and he didn't want to. Um, he's like, no, this is what we're known for. And I was like, I don't care. So we fought a lot about that. So I changed the design slightly. And then when we hired Marcus, it turns out Marcus can do a lot of things. Marcus is really capable and talented. So Marcus took over the designs and Marcus does them now. But whenever we are about to release a module, so we have the capability to get panels for prototypes. So we can just see if the panel is quite right. So when we get a prototype, it'll have a panel on it that should be close to what we think it's going to be. But we'll also, even in our Friday meetings, we'll fight it out there and we'll look it over and say, okay, well, that art doesn't look quite right. That art, maybe we should make that different. Maybe we should rename that, whatever. So we'll fight it out just as like the graphic design of the panel. And then from there, we fight it out when we actually have the module in hand, and then we have the final panel.
So I have a question then. Why the Magnus panels have just straight black panels?
Have you ever talked to anybody who does 5U?
Listen. We're not going to get into ponytails. We're just going to talk. Listen, I know a lot of people who only buy Eurorack systems that look a certain way or will only group their modules by brand. Shout out to Aaron. So it makes me wonder because, you know, that kind of broke with tradition a bit there. Not only was it not Eurorack, it was 5U, but it was also straight black panel.
So we did 5U because people were asking for it. And you know, we talk to customers, and if we think we can do something and not lose money, because I want my employees to be treated fairly and, you know, reasonably. So I need to not lose money. So we talked to a lot of people about doing 5U. We figured we could at least break even on it. So we agreed to do it. And then we got a lot of feedback saying that if we did not,
Make it
yeah, the
conform.
very first, so we had Bryce leaked a panel. When I say leaked, I let him take a picture of the prototype, and it had, you know, the old clicker label machines that you would
Yeah.
like turn the disc and click.
You just stuck it on there.
Yeah, we had labeled it with that because we had just like a piece of plastic as a panel at that point. We didn't have metal, and people flipped out that we were going to use that to actually label production products, which I was like, really? Why would you actually think that? But they did. And then Steven designed a noise engineering-esque panel, and I was like, this is a bad idea. And then we got our inbox flooded with 5U people saying it has to look like 5U. So I designed a second panel, and so we offered both. So you can get either panel. I think I took the traditional one or the noise engineering one off because people really wanted the traditional one for 5U. For people that really want a panel that looks a certain way, we will give people the DXF, the panel file, so that they can make their own.
That's nice that you guys would do that too, because there are a lot of people who want to have like a certain look and that kind of thing. Some people are ridiculous like me. Like I kind of like black panels in my modular, but at the same time, I really like the uniqueness of like each manufacturer having their own personality. Like if somebody came out and it looked like the carpet from The Shining, I'd be all about it. Like that would be, I'd be like, yeah, that's perfect. Do that, you know? But you know, a bunch of my friends would laugh at me for having it in my case. And I'd be like, you know, that's cool.
I'm more concerned about what modules sound like than what they look like personally.
I'm just more concerned about how much fun they are. They can sound horrible and I'm still like, yes, this is fun.
Am I having a good time when I play with this module? Like, that's all I care about. I don't really give a shit what it looks like, but some people do. And, you know, for that, like we had the panel files on the website for a long time, and, you know, people asked for them. We put them up. Nobody ever downloaded it. And it was a pain in the ass to constantly update because we release in a normal year, we release pretty regularly. So we stopped updating and took it down. But, you know, if anybody wants it, they just email, we'll give them to them.
That's cool. Yeah. See, and that's like, you know, so it's kind of like an in and out kind of off the menu type situation. It's the secret menu at Noise Engineering.
Exactly.
So let me ask you, cause I'm going to bounce around. Like I said, I want to ask about the AAX, the announcement. All right. So let's first start and say where this came about from and why AAX.
So we have been trying to release plugins for a very long time. We've had people asking for eons. And so we've been working on this. It is something that we've, you know, I know a lot of people really want to be able to use their modular in their DAW. Some people are just not modular people and they really want to do, really want to play with our stuff, but like just don't want to buy into a Eurorack case, whatever. So we started working on plugins a long time ago. We are almost to a point where we can release them on our own, but we are not quite there. We have a really good friend who works at Avid. And so we talked to him a while ago and said, hey, what if we were able to release as a Avid exclusive just through AAX? And, we kind of talked about how that would work. And it turned out that if we did that, if we did that, we could release Pro Tools first. That would allow us to check and make sure that everything on the back end that we had to construct just for plugins actually works. It's obviously a smaller market than VST and AU. We know that. We know people want it in VST and AU. We're working on it. But, it's way better to test all of your systems with a smaller market, right? So we wanted to do that, make sure everything actually works and it's not going to be a massive clusterfluff. And so that's going to be through the Avid thing for a little bit. If we hadn't done that, if we hadn't done AAX, we wouldn't be releasing anything yet. We can't release anything until we have a way to sell it on our own. We are actively working on that, but it's going to be a few months. As soon as we release as soon as we release the VST and AU, if you have purchased the AAX, you will get the VST and AU though.
How does this relate to the rack extensions that you guys did? That was what, a couple years ago?
It was. Those are really different. So we are the AAX first batch, and I say first because we have a lot in the pipeline. Just like with our Eurorack, we have a lot we're working on. We did 2 different synth bundles with Reason. One of them is the Basimilus, which is also in the AAX, but it's slightly different. If anybody that's used Reason knows that it's a really different ecosystem than your typical DAW. It's actually why we started in Reason, because it lends itself to the sort of Eurorack modular experience really well. There's a back panel. You're literally putting patch cables into it. Not literally because it's on your computer screen, but you are virtually putting patch cables in. So it made sense for us to start there. There are 2 synth bundles. One is the Basimilus. One is a Cursus Varior, which is Cursus Ateritas Varior, I think it's called, which is very similar to the one that we are releasing in AX, but it's slightly different. And then on the AX, we are releasing Desmodus, our reverb. That is currently not out in rack extensions, but we are coming back to rack extensions after we get through the VST and AU. We'll be adding more stuff to rack extensions.
And I think that reverb, you guys just released that last NAMM, right?
We announced it last NAMM. It came out in August.
Okay, so my memory. I'm impressing myself. So I can remember synthesizer stuff, just nothing else. So the rack extension thing, I remember when that happened, and it was like, I think that was just before they started even allowing VST with Reason. And I think with VST and Reason, it's like a wrapper kind of thing anyway. It's still a little bit disconnected from how a normal VST is done in there. So with that in mind, I have to ask, they had announced a platform. I want to say it was called Elk. And if you guys had, I'm just curious if you guys had, see, I'm the exact opposite right now. I'm like cooking in here.
I'm freezing. It's really cold in LA.
Well, it's cold here too, but I have zoned heating and air conditioning in here, and I have it piped up all kinds of hot for no reason. The question was, have you guys ever looked at the Elk platform? Because I know that the idea for that was to basically be able to take the code that was working with things in like rack extensions and that sort of thing, and be able to put them on the desktop at, cost affordable prices. I know that they did like a guitar amp like that, and I'm just curious if you guys had looked into that sort of thing.
Oh God. You're putting more things on our to-do list. Uh, we have not looked at elk. At least we haven't actively discussed it. Stephen may have pondered it, but it's not actively on the to-do list at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I am a Eurorack lover, obviously, but I also really, to me, it's not so much about Eurorack. It's more about input output, just being able to control things in interesting ways and send audio in interesting ways. So I'm like, I don't care if it's desktop or if it's Eurorack or whatever. Like it to me, I'm just like, get it on my desk and let
Yeah.
me use it. So um, that's something that I'm constantly wondering about when I see you guys creating more and more interesting you have like complete voices and you guys are really starting to cram more and more into each module that I see. You also now have a lot of things that have to do with, sequencing and gates and, all that kind of stuff. So it makes me wonder, are you guys considering doing like drum machine type stuff? Is this something that you guys have talked about?
We would love to. One of our main things is we don't have the. Um, so for I have like so many things happening in my brain. Uh, so I don't know how the companies that are doing them do them because we have no lead on a small quantity affordable casing. That is the number one thing that has stopped us from pursuing that.
Hmm.
In all honesty, we look at something like um, any of like, and that's also why we haven't made our own cases or anything like that. It's because like just getting the metal
Hmm.
is ridiculously expensive unless you're buying it in quantities that we don't want to buy.
Sure, sure.
So, if
That is one
anybody,
of the beautiful things about Eurorack is that it's like, you have a panel. You don't
yeah,
have to worry about power. You don't have to worry about, all these other
totally.
things. Um,
Yes,
yeah.
the enclosure is the main issue. We would love to do a drum machine, but at this point, I don't see it being feasible in the immediate future, just because we don't have a good lead on enclosures that we could find. Anything we could get for an enclosure would be so expensive; it would make the whole thing cost prohibitive. And
Mhm,
again, when we spec out a product, one of the things that we think about is cost and like, is this something that could even be a viable product from the consumer's perspective? Like, would
mhm,
somebody want to buy this at what we would have to sell it for? And if
mhm.
it's not going to be something that makes sense for people to buy, then why go forward?
Yeah. I have some people I may have to put you in contact with on that, but
Okay.
moving forward, so when you're handling the engineering side of things, that's one side of it, but noise engineering, I assume you guys are taking on a lot of different roles. Tell me a little bit about what else you're doing over at noise engineering and what the processes are entailing for you.
Oh God. Well, we now have 5 people, which is weird. Um, but so that means everybody does almost everything. Um, we what do I do?
This
If
this
you
is one of those things where you're doing a lot of things and you're just like, it's all just become natural now. You
I
don't
know I'm
think
at
about
my
it so
desk.
much, you just do it.
I'm at my desk like 12, 14 hours a day most days. I'm like, what did I do all day?
Are you
So
saying that this is not a get rich quick scheme?
I mean, yeah, it's totally a get rich quick scheme.
That's the whole
Super easy.
plan.
Super easy.
Yeah, I kinda figured.
Um, no, so I do, so if you contact noise engineering, um, I'm one of 3 people who reads the email, and then we split it up. If you have a repair, if you have a broken module, um, I am the person that handles it. I'm the one that does all of our physical repairs. Um, I do all of the actual design. So when we are working on prototypes, I'm the one that's doing the schematic and the PCB routing. I do a lot of the just general organization. Um, I do a lot of like relationship management. So we're working with a company. We're trying to get a new website, which is very exciting since I built the crappy website that we currently have in 2016, and I'll be honest, it's not amazing. Uh, so they said, "Well, do you have a CRM?" And I was like, "It's this. Our CRM is my brain." Um, so um, I do a lot of just like relationship management and outreach, like trying to find um, outreach options for particularly organizations that support women or people that are typically not represented quite as much in modular. That's my big um, well, and honestly, we have a team that's very devoted to specifically that. So women, non-binary, and people of color, we are specifically looking to support and just whatever we can do. So we are. I'm actively looking for opportunities, and that's a good chunk of what I do. Um, what else? Um, and then weeks like this week, a lot of it was just like prepping for launch. So we had the launch for the AX on Thursday. So this week was, because we are small, it was all hands on deck to prep for the AX launch. So it was everybody making content, everybody helping with the website, everybody making sure that the language around this makes sense, everybody like, and oh my god, our Slack has never been busier than it was this week.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do a lot of the hardware stuff, but because we're small, we do. I think that's the plight of the average Eurorack company. Most of us are small and we all do everything.
Yeah, sure, sure. The path that noise engineering has taken, it seems like it started off with a little bit of buzz, but it kind of blew up. At least from the outside looking in, I see it, and noise engineering in my mind is one of the top brands. Like if you say, hey, like what's a really great, Eurorack brand? What's something that does something that I'm not going to get in, a regular synthesizer, a keyboard synthesizer or whatever. I'm not going to get from like a Korg or whatever else, and maybe even Korg's not a great example these days, because I feel like a lot of what's been happening with like noise engineering and some of the smaller companies, Mutable Instruments and that sort of thing, is directly impacting what some of these larger companies are doing these days. You see things like the Korg, what is it, NTS platform, where they're allowing indie guys to develop for it, that sort of thing. With noise engineering kind of really becoming a household name in the Eurorack household, how has that been for you guys as far as trying to scale with that? Do you find that success is kind of daunting, or is it helpful? Like, how is that working out for you?
Um, First of all, thank you, and Travarsi, hell yeah, got to represent. Um, right.
Shout out to Shonda.
See?
Shout out Travarsi. Excuse me.
Shout out. Well, thank you for all of that, Ken. It has been, um, I don't know, like it doesn't, I can't say it feels like that, because when you're in it, it's just always
Head down
mm,
working kind of thing.
head down working, but also you know that you're always just like one catastrophe away from it all going away, you know?
Sure.
And particularly with this last year, it's just been like, how do we make sure that things continue? So it's always kind of scary, I guess. We've been really fortunate to grow, and I'm like, we work hard to make products um, that are different, that say something that's noise engineering. Um, like Steven has one module that he's been wanting to make that we just keep killing because we're like, what about that is noise engineering? And we veto him every time. He's like, but I want to do blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no. And all of us were like, no, no, it doesn't say anything about it's not our brand. No. Uh, so anything we do, we try to make it very much something that, like, okay, we have a quad attenuator. It doesn't say anything new. Yes, that's true. But there are some things that you just need. Like eventually,
Don't knock a quad attenuator.
I mean, I like our quad attenuator. Some things you just need if you want to have a noise engineering 208 case. And eventually we would love to have that. We want to make that happen. Um, we are not there yet. We have some hurdles. There are parts availability issues that are um, problematic, but there are things that get in the way, but there are things that, we just make because they need to be in the lineup, you know.
Sure.
But for the most part, if we're going to make something, we want it to be something that says this is a noise engineering module. And it fits with our ethos, it fits with our design and all of those things. It's, I don't know, I guess it's fun to be thinking about what is the noise engineering take on X,
Sure.
and I don't know, I don't think we have, I think there's plenty of room. My modular and particularly modular is so broad that there's so much room for people to do all kinds of fun stuff. So, like, I think there's room for people to do their take on another BBD, right? That's fine. It's not what we're doing, but I think there's room for that.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so
And
I don't,
you see it each year. Like every year there's a different bucket brigade delay out
yeah,
there that's, and oftentimes interesting.
yeah, yeah. One of our part of our design ethos, though, is just to try to do things that are, to the extent we can, different than what other people are doing.
Sure. So, where do you see noise engineering being in like 5 years?
I am hoping that we continue to diversify. Um, I, I talk to customers and they tell me what they really want to see, and it's hard to know. Like, somebody will spout off, "Oh, I would love to see product ABC." Would they actually buy product ABC? 50-50, right? Um, when 15 people come to you and say, "I want product ABC," then you probably have something that you should think about, right? I That's the case with VST plugins, right? Like, we want to have the ability for our customers to be in lots of places. I've seen some people complaining because, oh, but I really just want it in the hardware because I really like the hardware and blah blah blah. And it's it's something special in the hardware, and that's fine. But there's also a lot of people that either, as I said before, don't have the Eurorack rig or travel a lot. Maybe not so much currently, but
Yeah.
in general, travel a lot. Go on gigs, or need the ease of repeatability to have it on stage or something, right? And that is, let's face it, that is not Eurorack.
Mhm.
Eurorack is really freaking hard to travel with and really hard to tour with.
Yeah, yeah, and just do shows with in general. We've got a few people in the chat. CV Dope in the chat just recently, did a great live stream. I highly recommend people go check out his YouTube as well.
So good.
And yeah, like just performing and kind of doing that sort of thing. That's always something that I'm looking at Eurorack to kind of evolve on, and continue to get better at. I want to touch on the MicroFreak update. Okay, so Noise Engineering recently released, I want to say it's 3 new oscillators
Yep.
for the MicroFreak, and that was fairly unexpected from a lot of people. Can you give me a little bit of insight on how this kind of came about, and just some thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was a really fun thing for us. So Arturia approached us at NAMM 2019, And there was, I think that was the year that they announced the MicroFreak.
Hmm.
And they were like, "Hey, we have this thing. Um, do you want to develop some? We want to keep expanding it. We want to keep growing it. It's going to be a cool thing. And they're like, would you be interested in developing some alternative oscillators for it?" We're like, "Sure." Um, and then 2019 got extremely busy for both us and Arturia.
Hmm.
And we pretty much had the oscillators done, but we just like couldn't get it together. Um, and so at 2020 NAM, we showed the vert iter, which I've seen people asking about um, in the comments. So I'll just answer that right here and say we are still working on the vert iter. 2020 kind of threw everybody for a loop, and everything got pushed back a lot farther than we were expecting. But the vert iter should be out. After 2020, I am not promising dates on jack shit, but I'm hoping that it'll be early this year, but it should be, unless, who knows
Maybe
what.
by NobCon.
It should be this year. It should be this year. I'll just say that. Um, so anyway, we had pretty much gotten the oscillators done by NAM. So we showed the oscillators that we had put together for Arturia as the vert iter. They are slightly different between the two because the vert iter has only 2 knobs and the MicroFreak has 3. And so we showed it, and then Arturia shows up and they're like, "Hey, so about that." And we're like, "Yeah, so here's the module for it." They're like, "Cool." And they had initially only wanted 2 different oscillators. We sent them the code for the 3. And they're like, "Damn, these are all cool. Can we buy all 3?" So they took all 3, and then 2020 happened. Um, and so that slowed everything down, and um, France got locked down for a long time. We couldn't even get
Mhm.
contracts back and forth. Contracts would get lost in the mail. Everything was a disaster. Um, but eventually everything got sorted out. We did some back and forth, just with minor bugs, but they were super easy to work with. They were amazing. They were fantastic. And we finally set up to release, just feels like a month ago. But I guess that was not this past week, the week before.
How did you feel about the reception of it?
It blew us away. So Arturia really, the resources they put into that release really blew us away. It wasn't just our oscillators, to be fair. That release included a bunch of other really cool updates. But they really made it clear that it was a collaboration,
Mhm.
and gave us a lot of credit for it, which was very generous for a company of that size. A lot of companies of that size would say, "Oh, noise engineering, they're this tiny boutique niche brand, whatever, shit on them, and take what they did and put it in there and whatever." But they really took it as an opportunity to say, "Hey, look, we're working with this brand," and they gave us a lot of credit for what we did, and they were really great to work with. We would definitely work with them again.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah, like I know a bunch of the people over there. I've done a lot of work with them as well, and like Seb is like fantastic.
He is.
Just a really great guy and really great product manager. So it's really cool to see that you guys are working. When I got the email, I was like, because I was luckily I was involved in that early on as well, and I was kind of like, wait, what? I was just like, oh, this is gonna be cool. And sure enough, it's very cool, and it sounds very noise engineering. It definitely, if you scroll through the oscillator types on a MicroFreak, you can definitively tell this is noise engineering. Like this is not it's not a fake, kind of like half-hearted noise engineering sound. It's legit.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I love the fact that kind of the way that I tend to use a lot of my digital modules in my modular is more often than not, I'll throw them through a kind of smooth analog filter. That's just the way that I like taking brittle brittle, maybe not the right word, more like a lot of the digital stuff you can make break up in interesting ways, and then you let like a smooth analog filter kind of chew on that stuff, and the MicroFreak has that built in, so it kind of works together in a really nice way. You know, when you start using the filter on those things, you know, especially my personal is I really like the bass, and I've been using that a good bit lately, so that's it was really nice to see it, and I'm very happy that you guys were able to, you know, get that all together without any kind of like weirdness going on, because there has been a lot of weirdness going on over there. So unfortunately, but there's always that gets back to like the interestingness of having a small company where you're doing multiple things. You can communicate a lot more, you know? So I think sometimes in larger companies, communication can get a little bit tougher, especially in the world we live in today, you know?
Well, communication can be harder, but also larger companies often just move at a glacial pace, you know, and it's something we've learned, you know, we've had a couple of almost collaborations where we've just been like, good Lord, can we just move this along? And, you know, we've ended up bailing on a lot of things because we're just like, we just need to move shit along. And, you know, we're used to being able to be agile and move quickly and, you know, change things if we need to. And we don't have to get approval from 5 different departments because there's only 5 of us. And like, usually we're all pretty much on board with things. Like, we say, hey, we think this is going this way and we need to change. Usually we're all pretty much in agreement. So, yeah, it is definitely a joy to be very small. At some point, we're probably going to need to grow a little bit more. And I'm honestly a little bit reluctant to do that because you know, having only 5 people is really, it's a nice size to be able to just communicate with everybody.
Sure, absolutely. Um, let me ask you, just touching on the whole 2020 debacle. For noise engineering, what is that like in terms of you know, not traveling for events such as like NobCon and NAM and Super Booth and that sort of thing? Um, how do you as a company feel about that, and how did you feel about it before that?
Um, NAM, I have incredibly mixed feelings about. Um, in part because I am used to there being so many men there that just say the most horrible things. Um, I have gotten better about it once I realized that I could just say, you know what? You don't get to say that. um, so I have come to really actually enjoy NAM. Um, Part of that also is having Marcus and Akur, who do a lot of our demos. And then we have a couple of friends that help support us every year doing demos. And that means I give fewer demos and can go do, like, take the meetings with Arturia and like talk to people that I need to talk to, which is really um, a nice thing about NAM. And there's, you know, see friends, you know, bump weenuses with you when you pop up at a booth.
Indeed.
You know,
Which
that's
that was actually a struggle, is that oftentimes I would come by the booth in previous years and it was difficult getting time with you guys because either A, you were so busy, or B, you guys were hiding. So it was one of the two. So I was like, oh, you know what? This year, 3rd year in a row, I'm making this happen.
we never hid from you, Ken. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sure. There's only a few companies that I can say off top of the hand that I had trouble properly interviewing at NAM, or would have to like hunt people down, and noise engineering was high on the list. So like when I went out to that NAM, I was like, not only am I gonna get an interview, I was like, I'm gonna make this awkward. It's like, that's how this is going. And if
And
people have watched, this is because it's been a while. So like there's actually there's a Easter egg in one of my NAM interviews with noise engineering. I'm not going to say what it is or where it's at, but if you go back and watch those, those interviews, yeah, stick around. I have friends of mine looking at me while I'm filming it, and they're just, what the hell is he doing? Ah, jeez.
I have always enjoyed you, Ken. Um, but I mean, so in general, though, the shows I do miss the shows, whether it's NAM or Super Booth or any of them. They're just it's one of the few times that we get to see well, especially now we haven't left our house in months. Um, but like we never really get to talk to fans directly. Like, we talk to everybody that emails us and that sort of thing, but we don't really get to talk to people directly and like have them play with modules and like, let's talk about what you do. How do you use these? What do all that sort of thing. And it's really I don't know. It's a nice opportunity to really talk to customers about exactly how they're using our products, which we don't typically have a lot of.
It's one of those things where, you know, a lot of, especially the Eurorack scene, I think is filled to the brim with introverts. But this year kind of makes a lot of us introverts kind of look around. Well, I say us. I'm not an introvert. I'll tell you right now, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm lazy and I don't like going out, but I'm not an introvert. But a lot of the Eurorack scene definitely is, and it's interesting to see when you're not around your people for over a year. It gets that it really gets you kind of understanding what you're missing. Like for me personally, I can't say if I recall or not. Have you guys been to NobCon?
Hmm.
Yeah, NobCon is to me like that's like the perfect Eurorack show because it embodies like all of what and I haven't been to Super Booth, so I can't call it, but I just really like the whole like super small, like at night everybody's kind of staying in the same hotel. So you go down and you go down to the dance floor and then there's people like sitting crisscross on the dance floor because that's what kind of situation it is. It's just like, that kind of situation is very it's very telling, but it gets sad when you're kind of like, man, these are the only times that we really get to see each other is like at synth meets and these sorts of things. And you can only talk about it on the internet so much before you want to strangle someone.
Yeah.
Especially if you're on Facebook, which you are successfully avoiding. But yeah, so to me, I very much look forward to getting back to that kind of semi normalcy for the weirded out Eurorack crowd. Um, but yeah, I want to say thank you very much for coming on the show. Um, I did want to just touch on one other aspect of it, as far as the engineering side of things, right?
Yeah.
If someone is looking to get into Eurorack engineering now, where would you direct them to first? After you, like at the beginning of the show, we talked about how you just did a lot of Googling and that sort of stuff. With all that hindsight being 2020, is that still the route that you recommend, or just because I'd like to see more people getting involved in their own engineering and their own developing and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I would say that, there are now a lot more Eurorack companies, some open source everything. So, if you look at some of the open source stuff, then you can, particularly if you're looking for Eurorack, right? You could look at some of the open source stuff that's out there, um, and get a feel for how other people are doing it. Remember, if you use somebody's open source stuff, to please credit them and use the licenses properly.
Here,
Uh,
here.
but you know, typically, if you're going to look at open source stuff, use it to learn from. Don't just steal it. Uh, a lot of people are doing really cool stuff that's open source. Like Winterbloom is all like the big honking button you can see behind me. It's a mirror image. Uh, I love that thing.
What is that? I'm sorry.
The big honking button.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
Oh, you should.
I feel like I should, because that's like, yeah, that sounds right up my alley.
Yes, it's by Winterbloom, and it is a button that it comes loaded with a goose sample. So when you hit it, it makes a goose sound. But it's a sample, so you can put whatever you want on there. It's also a gate, so you can use it as a gate. It's a great module. I love it.
Nice.
But she open sources everything. So you can look at her stuff. You can look at other companies that are open sourcing things. Mutable open sources pretty much everything. Take a look at those. Take a look at because remember, your rack is going to be slightly different from pretty much everything else you find. So I would say Google open source. Those are the number one things that I would probably look at if I were getting into it now and just like from scratch.
Just to point everybody to your website, if everybody goes over to noiseengineering.us, Noise Engineering has a lot of interesting stuff up there. There's sample packs that you can check out. There's also a blog.
The sample packs are made by a ton of amazing people, including Travarsi, Corey from B-Boy Tech, Ricky Tinez. I don't remember who else we have up there at this point because we've got a bunch more coming. But we've got a load of sample packs, and if you buy those, the money goes directly. Oh yeah, Snakes of Russia. Oh god, yeah, that one. Yes, they're all so good. And if you buy those, the money goes directly to the artists. We don't take any cut of that. So support the artists that make really cool sample packs.
That's rather unusual. Usually it's at least 50-50.
No. This is, we basically loan out a case to some of our friends here in LA who are just awesome people. And to say, here, go record something. They're doing the work. I mean, why should I get a cut of them doing the work?
Travarsi did 1.8 gigs? That's a lot of samples. 1.8 gigs. Look at that. That is a lot of samples.
Look at that.
Go get that.
Because, Travarsi.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. Oh, and that would be Shuri yelling upstairs right now. My doggo. So I just wanted to say again, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to ask. And we can get that out there to people. And yeah, I'm just really happy that I got a chance to speak to you on here.
Yeah, this is a blast. And I'm so glad that thank you for looking at your analytics and making an effort to be more inclusive. That's awesome and kick ass.
Yeah, I'll just touch on that very briefly and just say that it's something that I've been aware of for a while, and I've kind of I keep circling back on it and trying to do things, and it's harder than people realize is the number one thing I would say about that. In trying to get more women just in general to be aware of the show is one thing, and then as far as parody and that sort of thing, I'm not expecting it to ever be 50-50. I'm really not, just because of the way things go. But I still just I want people to be inspired is the bottom line. Like, more so than anything else, I just want people to be inspired. Okay, so I feel like there's a lot to be inspired by talking to you. So I just appreciate you coming on the show, and hopefully by putting it out there in the ether, other people will be inspired, and we can see that those numbers grow naturally. It's not a forced kind of thing. It's more of just like a, hey, I want this, I want my daughter to be inspired. I want people that I don't know to be inspired. It's not so much a thing that necessarily affects me directly as much, aside from the fact that I really genuinely appreciate people from all walks of life bringing forth products and interesting ideas into the world. And, if it's all just a bunch of people, thinking the same way, then, things get humdrum, and, beige becomes the cool color, So yeah. Sorry that Akai from the 90s was just not good looking. So Oh, I'm sorry. That's just been on my mind because I've been thinking about the SE of the NPC Live and how much people are like, yeah, I want that beige color. And I'm like, but it's beige. So anyway, thank you again. And thank you everyone for watching. Shout out to D Steel for his donation, and shout out to Benjamin Izzo for his donation as well. That kind of stuff actually helps make the show keep going because yeah, like I don't do the show for like YouTube money or anything like that, because trust me, you're worth it. So all right, thank you everyone.
Everybody that has showed up and say that everybody that's saying hello in the comments, you guys are awesome. I see a lot of really awesome, friendly faces that I
It was a
really enjoy.
beautiful turnout today too. So we had a lot of people watching live. So I'm very happy about that. And